When Zachary was born, we knew that there was some things going on with Zachary, but we didn't quite know what it was. So he spent 5 weeks in the intensive care unit, and it was pretty overwhelming. I've got to say, he was born in June of '96, and I remember very little of what happened that summer.
When Tate was born, I went with him, with the nurse to get bathed. I was standing there, you know, this happy father of my first child, and she said, "I think your kid has Down syndrome."
There were plenty of struggles, plenty of issues. He was getting suspended, and he was getting referrals, and the behavioral issues were getting to the point where he was actually harming himself. He was diagnosed with autism, as well as ADHD, and he also has a learning delay.
Chase had a stroke or a mini stroke at birth, or even maybe in utero before he was born. The technical term is expressive receptive motor disorder. That the left part of the brain and the right part of the brain aren't talking to each other as in a normal brain. It was a challenge for the doctors to keep the baby alive. It was a challenge to find out what the diagnosis was. And we had to constantly fight to find out who could help, what therapies were available, what the insurance companies would pay for. We quickly learned that we had to become champions for our child.
You don't think about when you're having a child there's going to be something wrong or an issue. You don't think he's going to be in the hospital or something like that. He has something called Prader-Willi syndrome. He was a floppy baby, hypotonia. He was very weak. He couldn't feed himself, couldn't hold his head up, couldn't do other things that you'd expect a newborn to be able to do. And he had a lot of surgeries. And it was just totally overwhelming. We just didn't really know. We didn't know what was happening and what was going to happen to Zach. And it's only a couple hundred kids are born with this each year in this country. And of course, we'd never heard of it, and no one we knew had ever heard of it. And we discovered most doctors had never heard of it. It's so hard because nothing's worse for a parent than not being able to help their child.
I couldn't even drive home. I took the bus home, got to the house, and was just weeping uncontrollably in tears. Because this idea I thought of, this future my kid was going to have, was all gone. And it was just, I was devastated. And I just didn't know. I didn't know the idea that he was going to, have Down syndrome, and what that was going to mean.
Our disappointment, if there was any disappointment, was more within ourselves, than anything else. Because we were like, well, why didn't we recognize this earlier? And as a father, I felt like, I don't need help. This is my child. And I know my child better than anybody. But I didn't know the autism, And knowing your child is one thing, but knowing what they're suffering through in life is another.
So there's many things that a parent of a child with disabilities has to do that maybe parents of children without disabilities don't necessarily have to do. And it's not an occasional thing. It has to be almost every breath you're thinking, what can I do for this child to help them function well in the world?
We have constant battles for all aspects of Zachary's life. People with this condition are always hungry. And the part of the brain called the hypothalamus that tells you you're full doesn't work. So we lock up our refrigerator, we lock up our pantry, we lock up our freezer. We have alarms on all of our doors and windows. At school, there's a paraprofessional that sits with them to make sure he doesn't take food from other kids at lunch. He can't really do things like math or understand things that kids that are his own age might understand. Having a child, your life is different because all kids take a lot of time. And Zachary's got an older sister, and There are days that we think that Zachary's the easier of our two kids compared to his teenage sister. There's not very many of those, but occasionally that would happen. Like sometimes he's 14 years old going on 6 years old because that's some of his development type things. And that's all hard, but being a parent means watching out for your child, and Zachary didn't sign up for this, and I didn't sign up for it either, but that's what being a parent is, and it's my job to make his life as good as it can be.
I just had this calm come over me, and I thought, okay, if this is what it is, who better than me to deal with something like this? So after that day, I just sucked it up, and every step, every moment that I've had since then has just been about making his life successful.
One of the biggest challenges where we really had to step up, both my wife and I, was with the school district. I remember once that Chase couldn't get an assignment done on time, and so they punished him by making him run around the track 6 times. I lost it. I thought, you know what? To punish a child with disabilities because they couldn't do something that a child without disabilities could do. And that's the point where I drew the line and said, okay, done. And there was a couple of teachers in particular who didn't quite get it about special ed students. And shortly after that, they got it. And we try to educate, we try to motivate, we try to train, teach, help people, but every once in a while you have to kick butt and take names. I've
definitely had to step up and kind of put on my Superman cape. More or less with school. With children with disabilities, there's always that social piece. And I've found that interacting with him as his dad and as his friend in a social gathering makes it a lot easier for him to socialize. I've done everything from DJing school dances to, setting up play dates, and, one of the things that we do now is we'll sit and we'll play Battleship together, So what that does is it kind of introduces him to methods of socializing with others, and I never really looked at it as a hero thing. I just looked at it as being a parent. I feel like that's part of my duty as a parent, is to be my son's guidance, to be his inspiration, to say, okay, if my dad can do it, or if my dad doesn't have a problem with it, I should.
My expectations for my life with my son were certainly different than what it's developed in some ways. Playing catch out in the yard or things like that. And my dad and I used to do a lot of projects around the house. Zachary's not interested in learning any of those things, and he never really could learn any of those things. There are things, though, I can do with Zachary. We go to the library together, we go to bookstores together, but we can't do everything we'd like to do. It's hard to go on vacation. He doesn't have as much stamina as other kids. As a parent, you do what your kid needs and not necessarily what you want. I think hero gets overused. You hear people talk about someone being a hero. I think being a parent, taking care of your child, that's your job, that's your responsibility. That's not being a hero.
I just, don't really see myself as a hero. I just see myself as a dad, just trying to, raise, Tate and my other children.
Father-son relationships are challenging anyways. They think you're a hero up to a certain point, then all of a sudden it's like, see ya. One of the amazing things about having a child with a disability is how much the parents learn. In fact, my wife Cindy and I also a lot of times look at each other and go, wow, look how much we've learned, and this isn't the way we planned our lives, but we sure don't regret it because this has made us better people, having a child with a disability.
I'm kind of proud of the fact that I know a lot more than I did, and that's proof because I've gotten to the point where I can actually help others, and tell my story and say, hey, you know what, this is what I'm going through. Is there any way that my story can help you? It was stepping up and saying, hey, this is my child, I have to be a parent. That's another thing. and it's continuous, you know. So I guess even to this day, I'm continuously growing and trying to find new ways to reinvent being a male father figure.
You have a life there that is cherishable, and I hope everybody who's ever in this situation doesn't look at it as a negative, but, you know, just realizes that a family can thrive with somebody like that in their life. He's the hero. He's the one to be looked up to. He's the one who's doing stuff that, you know, people's preconceived notions of a kid with Down syndrome wouldn't be able to do.
I didn't appreciate this when he was younger, but and it's a tough way to have this happen, but I think in some ways I've become a better person because of Zachary. I think there are a lot of triumphs of being parent of a child, father of a child with a disability. You look at what their milestones are, and Zachary hits milestones. He just does it at a later stage than other kids. And he's very interested in the civil rights movement. And people like Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King are personal heroes to him. He's got a really great heart. And so I admire those things about Zachary.
Although he has been diagnosed with these delays and disabilities and everything that people say, oh, he's never going to be normal, he's gone above and beyond expectation.
I don't think it's ever stopped us from doing anything we ever wanted to do. In fact, anything that we ever wanted to do, we're doing it with more passion, heart, more depth.
I think everybody sees Tate and is astounded by who he is, his personality, his attitude, his positivity. You know, I enjoy every part of him, and, you know, getting to see all the successful things that he does. He's just Tate.
Just going by the numbers, I'm 60 years old, he's 23. I'll probably be fairly productive for another 15 years or so, but at some point I'm not going to be around. And so it's a combination of helping him with the skills that he needs to use when we're not around to help him, and also the financial aspect of it. Our goal is to get him to be self-sufficient, where he could get out into the real world, get his own house or apartment. That's the goal, and we're constantly striving for that. But realistically, it may or may not happen. So trying to make sure that there's something there for him when we're gone, so that he won't have to, on top of all of his other challenges and struggles, have severe financial challenges and struggles.
I don't have any different goals or dreams for Tate than, you know, the other kids whatsoever. I want him to get a job. I want him to, you know, live on his own. I want him to be successful at whatever he does. I want him to be a productive member of society. Those are the things that I want for him, but those are also the things that I expect from him. I expect that he's going to be able to do all this stuff.
I mean, it's hard knowing what the future is going to bring for any child, but especially for Zachary, because he can't watch out for himself, and eventually we'll be gone. My wife and I will be gone, and I don't know who's going to be watching out for Zachary, and that's really scary too. I just want to tell people that it's very hard having a child with special needs, but it's also very wonderful. And it's easier to love my son when he's in a good mood than when he's in a bad mood. And it's easier to love Zachary's typical sister, who's 19 years old, a freshman in college, when she's in a good mood than when she's in a bad mood. That's what being a parent is.
Nothing good comes easy, you know, and if you have that opportunity to be that child's role model or be anyone's role model with disabilities, do that wholeheartedly, you know, because it's rewarding, you know, and it's just, I'm preparing myself now to see what he does when he becomes an adult, because it's going to be very impacting, I think.
So now we get to see what the last 23 years of efforts have done. And it appears that we've been successful in many ways, but there's a lot of work still to do. So.